So today we're going to talk about the market characteristics in the Arab world, for B2B types of startups as well as B2C.
Mm-hmm.
We want to understand the customer actually. So, how do you approach the customer? And how can we define, or let's say build a persona for a typical Arab consumer? This is number one. And number two, a typical Arab business in the region. So I think this is one of one main thing that eludes us and eludes many other startups and businesses. And it will be a great help for all who work in the industry or who try to build startups in the region. All right. So you want us to start with the B2B or B2C first?
I'm personally, I think it's very interesting to start with the B2C, just because from our discussion in the first episode, it sounded more. There's room for development there. We can develop the story further in that domain. In the B2B was a little bit more restricted, and we will touch upon it later in the episode. But as of right now, I think we should start in the B2C first. So let's touch on the B2C.
All right. So the typical persona of an Arabic consumer.
Yep.
First of all, it's not always an Arab consumer, since the dynamics of each and every country is different. So in the GCC, it's different than Egypt, than Jordan, than Syria, than Morocco, than Algeria. You also have, even within the GCC, you have, for example, UAE, which I believe have 70% expat population compared to a 30% expat population in Saudi Arabia. So there is a difference between the two.
Mm.
And based on that, you'll see different consumer attitudes in every country. Let's talk about the general, let's say the very general characteristics of the market. The first thing which comes to me, and everyone's talking about it, especially in the e-commerce space, is the cash culture. So everyone, you cannot build a successful business, B2C business here in the Middle East, without depending on cash. Either if it's an e-commerce, it's cash on delivery, or if it's you're actually doing some selling physical products, it's actually cash transactions. So compared to, of course, credit transactions, which are more prevalent, I believe, in the US and Europe and all over the world. Now here, people are not used to, and adoption of credit cards is still very, very slow. And so COD, cash on demand, is the top, let's say, top priority for all tech businesses working in the space, as in a B2C environment.
Okay.
So how can we? So what are, let's say, the disadvantages, the cons of having a cash culture instead of a credit culture?
So yeah, I mean that your buying power is different, right? When you're stuck to a cash model versus a credit, that'll be one. You'll be more. I imagine this. A typical persona there would be more susceptible to not taking risks, right? So you're not going to take risks because you want more guarantee on success. And
for example, if you're an e-commerce, it's delivery of a product. So if you don't get the product, or you don't like the product, actually, you can reject it from the door.
Yeah. And again, it's exactly that, because there is the lack of or the fact that the consumers will be less risk averse, will be more risk averse, or afraid of taking risks, would lead towards it'll be more difficult to build trust between a startup and an end user, right? So you have that. So, for example, a company like an Amazon, which is entirely a store existing on the web, I imagine it's very difficult to have that relationship built, and it's evident in how long it took to actually have an e-store successful in the region, right? And that leads to very slow uptick.
And here you have the adoption, and another main thing is the adoption of subscription-based services, which is now, all tech companies are heading towards a SaaS model. So a SaaS model is dependent on a subscription, monthly subscription, yearly subscription, that gives the startup or the business an advantage of knowing upfront what its recurring revenues are. So it gives a bit of power and predictability to the business. So if you're dependent on cash, you don't have that kind of, let's say, quote unquote, protection or predictability. Because
I think that the protection,
the service or not. For example, some services like you have like Stars Play or Anghami, especially, for example, let's take the example of Anghami. Anghami, they stream music to customers here in the Arab region. What they did in the beginning is they didn't have a subscription model. They based their model on the telecom service providers. So you can subscribe to the service through, for example, your local telecom service. And so consumers are used to paying their phone bills.
Exactly.
Every month. And so they pay for the service through their phone bill. So it's kind of a workaround this type of subscription or let's say credit culture. And it gives
so they're building on a trusted model. The consumers trusts or understands what paying a bill for phone means, and they just building on top of that existing system.
And you have many other companies also depending on that type of model. Of course, who's benefiting the most is the one sitting in the middle, which is the telecom company, because they're getting a commission out of these payments that are going to the other companies. But it's a way, it's a workaround. It's a workaround around. Help solve that credit versus cash problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak from experience. When I first purchased the book on Amazon, which was at the beginning was just a bookstore, right? You're just buying books from Amazon, unlike now. I purchased the book. It was for college, and I was very worried that they will not honor their delivery, right? Because I never purchased on them before. Now e-commerce is an afterthought. I wouldn't even
now we have everything
wouldn't understand the model. Yeah, I wouldn't understand the model that you have to tie it on to a phone company or an energy company bill to build some sort of it's a pseudo credit system, even though it is not credit for sure. It's different. Yeah, and maybe that's visible in how people in the region there look towards the bank, for example. Like, what is what are they when you mention the bank?
There's no trust in the banking sector, actually.
Exactly.
There'll be when you're, for example, in COD deliveries, also the middleman also is the one who profits. So who's the middleman is the courier, the Aramex, and other local delivery couriers within the region. They take commission out of it, and of course you don't get your money immediately. So you paid each and every cycle, every 2 weeks or every 1 month, and so on. And sometimes there are disputes, sometimes the money is delayed. And so this is, all these problems are actually affecting negatively the growth of startups and growth of businesses in the region. So I think, and it's not something that's going to go away. The people are anticipating, because of the global pandemic, that the society or the community will shift to a more credit culture. And you have, the next stage.
But that's a good observation, or prediction.
The next stage of credit is to go directly from cash to mobile payments, where you directly pay from your smartphone.
So you see something like like the Apple Pay.
So you have something like that.
So you may see
a shift. So you may see a shift from the cash culture to that smartphone.
Completely bypassing the credit. Completely bypassing credit. That's interesting.
But it's still a mix here. You don't have a strong growth of these type of payments, and you don't have compared to the growth of credit cards, as well as the dominance compared to the dominance of cash, the cash culture here in the middle. So cash will still be here to stay. I've listened on to a webinar a couple of days ago by the founder of Namshi, and he said, one of the main problems that they have was in Namshi was cash on delivery. That people, whatever way they try to frame it, people want to stay on cash. So they try to give them some type of incentive. Let's say if you buy through a credit card, you can get, like, say, a 5% discount on the product, but you cannot, drive the need to pay through credit cards by providing discounts on continuous basis to customers. It's not a sustainable business model.
Yeah, it's interesting how the difference in payment systems, how it's shifting globally speaking. So you've got exactly world, like countries that have already skipped the whole credit card phase and jumped immediately to mobile payment, like the Chinese, for example. And over here, it's, from a technology standpoint, phone payment has been around, but it's still, I'd say credit card is the dominant means of payment in the US. And I think we're at the point where cash is not exactly welcomed, but it's still acceptable. I think in the opposite in China is completely, they wouldn't even understand, like, why are you paying with cash?